Hey everybody, this is Joe. We're talking about Marvel Multiverse, and we're going to talk about an ambiguous rules interaction. Here we go. Here's a question. Mechanically, what constitutes an attack? I know this might seem trivial or that it's just semantics, but I promise you it's not. This actually has very real consequences for the way that certain powers work in Marvel Multiverse, how likely they are to work, how much you can boost up their ability to work. What actually constitutes an attack roll in this game? Knowing what does and does not constitute an attack actually has a profound difference on the way certain powers work in Marvel Multiverse. So we're going to look at three parts of this today. First, why does this matter? Two, why is it ambiguous? And three, what is the best ruling we can make with the information we have right now? So first, why does this matter? Why does it matter that we differentiate what constitutes an attack roll from any other type of roll? Well, it has to do with powers that ask you to make offensive rolls against an enemy that have dire consequences, but are not necessarily attacks. Here is just one example from the biggest damage dealer I've ever made, the cheater face time traveler that I called Over Again. He has a power that I didn't build around, but he had, called Time Travel Other. There are a number of powers like this in Marvel Multiverse that have very dire consequences to the enemy, but are not necessarily called attacks. And I'd like to read you the language so that I get it word for word. The character makes an ego check against the vigilance defense of a target they have grabbed. If the check is successful, the character can send the target to another time. So being able to grab an enemy and simply send him to another time, which is permanent, it's not concentration, basically ends that character in the campaign. They're gone unless they have the ability to time travel. That is an insta-kill power, and it relies on one roll of the die, and it is called an ego check. Now, why is that so important? Well, what if this character also had the Discipline 3 power? Discipline 3 says the character adds a +3 to their ego damage multiplier, and they gain a +3 bonus to ego checks other than attacks. In other words, the Discipline 3 power would work with Time Travel Other, adding to the ability to send somebody to another time. However, there is every reasonable argument to be made that grabbing somebody and then making a roll in order to offensively send them to prehistory with no ability to get back, being offensive would constitute an attack. And this is why understanding what is an attack is so important, because it's actually ambiguous in the rules. First, we can take a look at the standard actions section of the core rulebook. And the standard actions section lists a number of things that you can do with your action on your turn. They include helping a teammate, using a power, doing another move, or attacking. The attacking section lays out that close attacks are within a character's reach and are done using the melee ability score. Ranged attacks use the agility score, and they talk about line of sight and some other things, but they don't get into definitions of what specifically constitutes an attack. If we were to just take a look at the standard actions section, we might get a sense that an attack is something very separate from anything that is referred to as a check. But if we take a look at the section on ability scores, it actually gets more ambiguous. For instance, the agility section says agility is the ability of a hero to make attacks at a distance. Agility affects agility action checks for things like acrobatics, driving, and blasting enemies from range. That last part is important. It specifically is telling us that an attack is a type of check. So when something like time travel other asks for an ego check technically speaking can include an attack, meaning we don't have a clear definition of what actually constitutes an attack. There are 6 attributes in this game. 4 of them are able to make attacks, 2 physical and 2 mental. Each one of the attacking ability scores has some powers that allow you to boost damage. They are going to be your mighty, your evasion, your discipline, and your brilliance powers. The language of each one of these is identical. They stipulate that you can either get a bonus to your damage multiplier or a bonus to a check. And I think that the answer to what constitutes an attack lies in that language. I think that the answer to what constitutes an attack lies in the language of these damage multiplying powers, because they say that a roll will either get a bonus to damage or a bonus to the roll, but not both. Let's take a look at just a power to understand some basic language on something that is unambiguously an attack. The point blank parry power says that we make a ranged attack. Upon a success, they take regular damage. Upon a fantastic success, they take double damage and have the bleeding condition. Okay, that is a power that says the word attack, and then it says the damage consequences. So there's no ambiguity here. This is definitely an attack. Also, if we were to try to make an ego-based roll in order to persuade somebody, that is obviously not an attack roll. So what we could assume then is that anything that does damage is going to have damage language in the power, is probably going to say that it is a melee or a ranged attack against an enemy or enemies, and therefore we've linked the word damage in the effect of the power to the word attack in the description of the power. And therefore anything that simply says a check is not constituted as an attack roll. And that is the way that I have been ruling this when I've taken a look at powers, when I've done character builds on this channel. But if you think about it, that is weird, right? Let's take a look at just one example. You can do a grab as an action on your turn, and trying to grab or grapple an enemy does no damage unless you have the grappling technique power. Because it does not do damage, it does not, by our definition, constitute an attack. Let us say that you have the Mighty 2 power. This would add a +2 to your grab effort, making you more likely to actually grab the enemy. But now let's say that you take the grappling technique power, which allows you to do damage and grab as an effect of the power. By this ruling, you would not apply the +2 to the roll to grab them, but instead it would be added to the bonus. So did your character just get worse at grappling people? It's also a little bit strange to say that incredibly powerful things like time travel other are actually not attacks. They are obviously offensive, they obviously have dire consequences, and they happen during combat. But by a strict definition, they are not attack rolls. So here's kind of where I'm landing. I think the best way that we can rule this right now is that an attack is something that does damage. Flat out, that's what it is. And this has weird byproducts, but I think it's the best decision we as narrators can make. But I would like to see clarification on this from Marvel in upcoming publications, because there are interactions, as we've explored, that are a little bit strange. And this makes things like time travel other, frankly, a little bit easy to abuse, and that might be problematic. So in future character builds, when you see me use resize other and time travel other and other examples of this interaction, and I do apply the extra bonus to the roll that things like accuracy or discipline grant, this is my analysis for where that comes from. But if I see any update on this rule from Marvel, I will, of course, update the way that I evaluate this in the future. All right, that's it. Short video for you this week. YouTube's made out of buttons. I hope you press some of them, and I look forward to seeing you next time. All right, peace.